Hello and welcome to another episode of A Brief History. Today's episode, Nirvana. Ready, set, go. Aberdeen, Washington, 1987. Two young musicians named Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic form a rock band soon to be named Nirvana, with Chris on bass and Kurt on guitar and vocals. Inspired by the punk rock acts of the 80s and 90s and the doom metal acts of the 70s, Nirvana's approach to rock music was the exact opposite of the flash and glamour of the hair metal bands that had ruled the airwaves at the time. But of course, a rock band cannot be a rock band without a drummer, and in their early days, Nirvana sure went through their fair share of drummers. Can I get a drum solo? Thank you! Originally, the band's drummer was a man named Bob McFadden, but after a few months, this lineup fell through when Aaron Burkhardt was brought in to take McFadden's place. Burkhardt eventually lost touch with Kurt and Chris, leading to the two working with drummer Dale Crover, and then Dave Foster, and then Burkhardt again, and then finally Chad Channing. And it was with this lineup of Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic, and Chad Channing that Nirvana released their debut album Bleach on Sub Pop Records in 1989. By this time, Nirvana was an established act in the emerging Seattle grunge rock scene, but large-scale mainstream success continued to elude them. That was until 1990 when the band began to work up on a follow-up to Bleach with producer Butch Vig. And it was around this time that Kurt and Chris were becoming dissatisfied with Channing's drumming, and Channing was feeling too uninvolved in the songwriting process. All of this combined led to Chad Channing's departure from Nirvana, and thank God, because his name is too hard for me to say. And thus, Nirvana's search for a permanent drummer began again, and eventually all of their efforts accumulated with the introduction of former Scream drummer Dave Grohl to the band later that same year. Now that the final chapter of the Drummer Chronicles had closed, Nirvana was finally able to record and release their sophomore record Nevermind on DGC Records in 1991. Nevermind's first single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, became an unexpected monster hit, skyrocketing Nevermind to #1 on the Billboard charts and bringing both Nirvana and grunge music into the mainstream. With Nirvana now on top of the world, they began to work on their third album. This album, In Utero, was released on September 13th, 1993, and with the help of the hit single Heart-Shaped Box, In Utero debuted at #1 on the Billboard Top 200 charts and has sold over 3.5 million copies to this day. In October of 1993, Nirvana embarked on their first US tour in 2 years, and for this tour, they had a second guitarist to their band. This guitarist was Pat Smear, formerly of the punk band The Germs. Pat was simply a Pat Smear was simply a touring member of the band. However, he will become much more relevant in A Brief History of Foo Fighters, coming to a FootofaFerret YouTube channel near you this April. During a 1994 European tour, Kurt Cobain was found unconscious in his hotel room and rushed to the hospital. It was announced that this was caused by a combination of alcohol and an overdose of Rohypnol. Kurt's health scare led to the cancellation of the rest of the tour, and after a failed stint in rehab, Kurt Cobain was found dead in his home in Seattle, Washington on April 8th, 1994. His cause of death being a self-inflicted shot to the head. And having lost their main songwriter and their good friend in 1994, Nirvana disbanded. Dave Grohl and Pat Smear moved on to form the band Foo Fighters, while Chris Novoselic eventually quit the music industry and began dabbling in film and politics. In 2012, Dave, Chris, and Pat came together with the great Paul McCartney to record a new song called Cut Me Some Slack as part of Dave's documentary Sound City. This was revered as the Nirvana reunion the world never expected to happen. When Nirvana came out, the music industry was in dire need of something new and different, and that new thing turned out to be grunge music, and no band was more associated with grunge than Nirvana. Their mixture of heavy riffs and pop melodies helped define rock music from the 1990s and on, and it's pretty safe to say that their influence will carry on for decades to come. I'll see you in a week, guys. DFTBA.
White boy funk sucks.